Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Straits Times and Business Times Roundtable on Budget 2023, brought to you by UOB. I'm Vikram Khanna, Associate Editor of the Straits Times, and have the pleasure of moderating this panel. We are privileged to have with us Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong, who is the Chief Architect of Budget 2023. We are also joined by two distinguished panelists, K. Thanalachmi, Vice President of NTUC and President of the Healthcare Workers Union, and Alvin Liu, Senior Economist at UOB, who specializes in analyzing the Singapore economy. Welcome, DPM Wong and fellow panelists.
Thank you.
Well, we have a lot of ground to cover, so let's jump right in. Okay. DPM, I'd like to start with the title of the budget, which is Moving Forward in a New Era. What is this new era? What has changed?
Many things have changed.
And how will it impact Singapore?
The whole world, Vikram, is changing. We are seeing superpower rivalry taking place before us. It's happening in the world. It's taking place in the region, in Asia. And the whole model of globalization that we have been used to for 30 years, is also changing. Our multilateral trading system is changing, and all this will make life just that much more difficult, especially for a small and open economy like Singapore. Now, at the same time, while these external changes are happening, we still have to grow our economy in order to create the resources, generate the resources we need to uplift the vulnerable segments of society, to take better care of our aging population, and to make sure that our social compact remains relevant and strong. So this is, I think, all that I've just described. It looks like there's a lot to adapt, but that's what the new era is from our perspective. There is a lot that we need to do to adjust and adapt to this new environment, both externally and within Singapore. But I would also say this is not the first time that we have to adapt to changes around us. We've been doing this consistently since Singapore became independent, and we have always succeeded in restructuring and adapting to a new environment, and I'm confident we can do it again.
Right. Alvin, do you have anything to add to the external environment and how it has changed?
Definitely the external environment is more complicated and more, I would think the geopolitical is really one of the key things that has shifted in the last few years. And the US-China tensions or rivalry itself has created many challenges for the business community but also opportunities. And we have to, I think, adapt to this new environment. But also at the same time, I think cost is also an issue that a lot of people are facing. So there's a mix of a lot of things that in the backdrop. But I think cost is definitely one, and it is not just about domestic. I think it's a global kind of cost situation, and the other side is on the geopolitical environment.
Right. Okay, we will get into the cost issue a little later. But first, let's just focus on the overall thrust of the budget. DPM just mentioned that there is emphasis on growth. Well, some commentators have suggested that the budget emphasizes redistribution and social issues more than it does growth. My question is, does it do that? Do you agree with that view? And also, should growth or social issues have greater priority? What do you think, Alvin?
For me, right, I think the distribution part is significant, and I think it's rightly so, because there are actual concerns on the floor, on the ground itself, right, that warrants the measures that are being taken. Inflation is a real problem, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. So those measures to help inflation, right, for people to cope with inflation and for businesses to cope with inflation, right, would be very welcome. But at the same time, I don't think that the budget has neglected on expanding the economy. We did see measures that come in, right, to help on or to promote innovation, for example, the enterprise scheme. So I think there is both sides that is covered in the budget. Perhaps one area that some of my peers and myself, right, were looking for a bit more was on the sustainability issues that was more prominent in the previous budget, but less so in this.
Right. And DPM, how do you respond to the charge that the budget emphasizes redistribution, social issues at the expense of growth?
I thought I responded in the debate.
Yeah.
We have never changed. Growth remains paramount, because if we do not grow the economy, and we have a shrinking pie, I think things will be much more difficult for Singapore, and Singaporeans will have fewer resources, less resources to redistribute, and there will be a lot more societal divisions fighting over a shrinking pie. But at the same time, we have never pursued a strategy of growth for growth's sake or growth at all costs. That has never been how we've done it in Singapore. We've always looked at growth as a means of advancing the well-being of everyone in Singapore. And the key is well-being and everyone. So it's not just for a select few, but we want to make sure that every citizen benefits from the nation's progress.
Right. Ms. Thanalakshmi, would you have a view on whether the budget is strong on redistribution and whether it should be or should more be done? What do you feel about that?
First and foremost, from the workers' perspective, I think the budget is very well welcomed. It's a very inclusive budget, and there's something for everyone. I think the main focus on training, worker training, amplified a lot. I think the government support for this aspect of it, to ensure that the workers are placed in the jobs that sustaining, is very important aspect. So the job skills integrator is a main highlight, for labor movement. And apart from that, if you look at from the employment landscape, the demographic of workers are changing. More younger workers are coming into employment, and at the same time, we have aging population. There are more matured workers who want to remain in employment. So, and we also have a population that values work-life balance, and family becomes an integral pillar, a foundation, for the nation to grow. I think there's something for everyone, I would say, in this budget. And having this distribution for the social cause is equally important as we grow the business. So, in short, I may say that the budget is pro-business, pro-worker, as well as pro-family, and in all pro-Singapore.
And pro-growth as well.
That's what we try to be, as comprehensive as possible. To respond very quickly to what Alvin said, this budget may be lacking in one area, sustainability. I've heard that feedback, but I've also tried to explain to people that one cannot just look at the budget statement in isolation. It's impossible for the budget statement every year to be all-encompassing. You've got to select your priorities, and you've got to try, of course, to be as inclusive as possible, but you've got to select a few areas to highlight. And the one reason why we didn't specifically highlight sustainability measures in this year's budget statement was precisely because we just covered it at great detail in last year's statement, and many of these measures are still work in progress. But we will obviously give an update in due course, or once we see more results.
DPM, I would like to go into house prices. There's a lot of angst about housing, and the root cause is rising house prices. And house prices and rents have risen far more than incomes over the past year. And this may seem surprising because this happened at a time of slowing growth as well as rising mortgage rates. So why has this, and this not happened anywhere else in the world? I mean, most other places, house prices have been falling.
Yeah.
So why is this happening in Singapore, and is this a temporary problem?
Vikram, if you look at the situation before COVID, the housing market, both the public and private housing market, was relatively stable. In fact, on the public market side, house prices, resale prices were coming down for 6 consecutive years from 2013 to 2019. So suddenly something changed in the last 3 years because of COVID. What has changed? Really, at the root of it, it's a supply issue. COVID brought about disruptions to the completion of projects, both in the public and the private sector. So supply was impacted. Now, in the past, when we have a crisis, supply gets impacted, demand also comes down. This time around, demand didn't come down. Demand stayed very strong for several reasons, we think. Number one, on the public market side, when supply got impacted, BTO queues got longer. And I think many Singaporeans got anxious. I mean, the psychology is, if I have to wait 6 years instead of 4 years for my BTO flat, I better join the queue now, I better apply earlier. So more came forward, and then those who couldn't get their flats on time decided to go to the resale market, and that pushed up prices on the resale market. Where the private property market is concerned, there were several things we saw. I think there were changing norms because people wanted to have more space in their flats. More people, especially younger Singaporeans, wanted to live on their own. So that pushed up demand as well. And because of the delay in completion, there were more Singaporeans also looking for rental. So pushed up rental demand. And because Singapore has also done well in the last 3 years of the COVID-19. So you've got non-residents coming here, some coming back, some coming here for the first time, also seeking rental, and that also pushed up demand. So you have a very, very exceptional and unusual circumstance where supply was impacted, but demand remained strong, and that's why you have the imbalance that we have today. How do we deal with it? I think we just have to get to the roots of the problem, which is a supply issue, and make sure that we increase supply in the housing market, which is happening. So this year alone, we will have 40,000 new completions for both private and public housing. And that's the highest in about 5 years. So considerable supply coming on stream. For this, from 2023 to 2025, we will have about 100,000 new completions, new property completions for both the private and the public markets. So I think if we continue to ramp up supply, and at the same time we have been moderating demand with 2 rounds of cooling measures. So when you combine the steps that we are taking on both the supply and on demand side, I'm confident we will be able to bring stability back to the market again.
When will that happen, do you think?
I wish I had a crystal ball. No one can guess how asset markets operate, but it will work. We've been through these cycles before in the property market. It may take some time because you're not only pushing out supply, but you also have to manage demand, and it takes time for sentiments to change. But as you said just now, with rising interest rates, with a slower economy, I think people will also start to moderate their sentiments, and we already see some signs of that in the housing market now.
Yeah, right. Alvin, views on the housing market, why prices have gone up, how temporary this is going to be?
I mean, the reasons that DPM has stated is what we are seeing right now. Of course, it's unfortunate that if you put in case of what we see in the US, for example, right, where the interest rates have risen up quite substantially, and that has slowed the market, their housing markets. For us, we have seen a combination of other factors that have kept demand elevated. Of course, the issue is these things come in cycles. I would think that you see the prices slowing.
Price increase is slowing.
Yeah, the price increase slowing. Okay. But again, this is a factor of what you see the demand on the demand side is, which has remained fairly strong. Okay. And I think the concern, if you put it, is that with this itself, this adds to cost of business, because in terms of rentals itself, and it feeds into the foreign market itself, this becomes an issue if it doesn't come down. But I don't think it is a permanent issue. The problem is it can be quite acute in the near term.
Okay.
We're watching the rental market very carefully because it does impact on the cost of doing business. Right. And so the MND, URA, the government agencies are watching that carefully, looking at how they might be able to help, particularly for some of the more essential workers, help ramp up supply of housing as soon as possible, so that this can help mitigate some of the cost pressures that employers face, particularly in these critical, essential areas.
Okay. Okay, let's go on to workers and jobs. This is your specialty, Ms. Thanalakshmi.
Yes,
We have some unemployment. It's low. I mean, it's just under 3%. But yet, we have lots of vacancies, lots of job vacancies. We've been pouring resources into training for years and years, right? But somehow it doesn't seem to have delivered great employment outcomes. Why is this the case? What is the problem with training so far? What has happened? What has gone wrong?
Yeah, first and foremost, Vikram, I would like to address the issue of many jobs are available. Okay, at the same time, many of people, Singaporeans, looking for jobs. But there is a gap. That gap is skill set gap. So because of structural unemployment that they are faced with, they are supposed to turn around their skills, faster so that they are able to get a placement in those sectors and growth sectors. But however, you must understand that training takes time. For instance, in the healthcare, to train and enroll nurse, it takes 18 months, for matured workers to go through. And for the more professional they become, it takes a more structured training to happen for them to acquire the job. So we must accept the fact that training takes time. And how can we modularize the training? How can we have a bite-sized training, more customized on-the-job training? And how can we link it with placement, train and place? That means once you train, you place them. So that part of it, we need to ensure that it's done. But there's no quick fix to it. If you do a quick fix, then the dropout rates will be high. So we need to really strategize to ensure that we get the right people into the right placement and provide them that kind of training that they are able to acquire. So that's the first part of it. The second part is that I think what is important for businesses is that as they go through transformation, it is important that they do not leave out the worker part of it. Yes, transformation means using new technology, digitalization, automation and all. But at the same time, the focus should be a roadmap, a training roadmap for workers, what does it entails for their future jobs with all these transformations coming in. So that part of it, there must be more investment going into it. The government is supporting. We are very happy that DPM has announced a slew of measures for training especially. That is why in NTUC we have a company training committee. We urge companies to form a company training committee and focus on it. We also have a company training committee grant, again, a hospice of our government who gave hefty money for NTUC to run those programs. And what is essential is employers to be part of this journey, form a CTC, company training committee, make use of the grant, do not forget the workers, get them trained into skills that are relevant, not send them for training for the sake of training. Okay, a lot of workers are saying, I'm going for training but I can't get a job. So that part we need to reduce that kind of perception that workers have. The other part of it, do not forget the older workers, the matured workers, because we are into aging population. It is important that matured workers are also trained, and not left out as no return of investment. Okay. So that part of it, older workers are not liabilities to the government. They are essential support that mentors the younger ones. So that part of it, I think more emphasis required.
Okay. Yeah. DPM, you introduced you piloting a new scheme, the Job Skills Integrator. Mm-hmm. Now, how will this actually work in practice? And how will it be sufficient to sort of solve this problem of unfilled vacancies?
Sure. Vikram, you started out by describing the problem of unfilled vacancies as a reason why, or a symptom of training not being effective enough. But it may not actually be so accurate in the following sense. First of all, our unemployment rates are back to pre-COVID levels. Our employment rates are also back where they used to be. We are literally at almost full employment situation. And yet there are vacancies available. It's not a bad problem to have.
It's a good problem.
That there are more opportunities. But what we must expect, therefore, that not every job will be, we can't protect every job. There will always be a process of churn in the economy. Businesses that are not so viable, that whose prospects are not so good, the jobs may become obsolete over time. But then what you need to do is to help the worker transit to a higher value job. And that higher value job could be within the same industry. It could be in another industry. It could be by the same company, but it may more often than not likely to be by a different company. And that transition is what training is all about. It's not easy to do, and that's what we are trying very hard to do. So the high number of vacancies alone can be a little misleading in that sense, because not all vacancy is the same.
Right.
We are focusing on the higher value jobs, and we're trying to help workers move from where they are, jobs which may be lower in value, to jobs which are higher value, and the worker in the process gets better pay, gets a better career prospects. We've been trying to do this for some time. I think it's been showing results, and the Job Skills Integrator is just yet another step in the process. We hope this will help. It's really about trying to coordinate and integrate all the efforts within the ecosystem. Because as Sister Tana said just now, in order for this to work, you really must start with the employer. The employer must know how their business is changing, what's their future business model, what are higher value activities that they are pursuing, and what are the skill sets that they need. Then the training provider needs to coordinate, work very closely with the employer to design the relevant courses, make sure that the courses after graduation, the workers are in demand. Then you get the worker on board, and you have to identify the right worker, someone with the right fit, with the suitable abilities and aptitude for this particular course and this particular industry. And to bring it all together, it's often not so straightforward. And that's why we looked at different models around the world. We think that there is some value in formalizing this role of an integrator. It's not as though we don't do it before. We've done it, but in a more ad hoc way. But we thought that there's some value in formalizing it, give it a little bit more resources with clear outcomes to deliver. And we are starting with 3 sectors in precision engineering, retail, and wholesale trade, just to see what the outcomes are. And if it's successful, we can scale up to other sectors.
Right. And what about workers who, despite all these best efforts, cannot be placed? What do we do about them?
I'm sure they can be placed. It's a matter of, if they don't want to work, that's a different matter. And so in any economy, there will be some underlying unemployment rate. It's never zero. Like I said, we are almost at full employment now. So what's the issue is really trying to help workers identify where might be the next better opportunity, where might be a better fit. And then to also focus on helping workers who might become displaced or retrenched. Because it's not always optimal for the displaced and retrenched worker to immediately find the first job that becomes available to him or her. They may want to do that because they have bills to pay and they really need to get the finances in order. But frankly, from a system point of view, it may not be the most optimal outcome. We want to make sure that the worker gets time to identify what their abilities and strengths are and get matched to an opportunity which will be better suited for that person. So how then can we have a system in place that will enable this better matching of worker to opportunity, to have a better functioning labor market that will ensure better re-employment to higher value jobs? That's something that we are studying very carefully.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to add what Deepan mentioned, exactly what NTUC is doing to ensure better wages, better work prospect, and better welfare for workers. And we are doing it in 2 prongs. One is on progressive wage model for lower wage workers that are lower skilled, and to try to elevate them to a better skill and better wages. But the other part they're looking at through our conversation, called Every Worker Matters, we want to establish a social compact with workers. With that kind of compact, we also received a lot of feedback to say that, hey, what kind of job is suitable for me? Just like what Dipen mentioned, workers are also asking themselves, so what is the best job that's suited? So for that to happen, we need to have a career conversation. A career conversation is essential to navigate, potential workers, applicants to the right direction. So as the needle points to the direction, they are more excited and they will want to, they are more motivated to do the skills, to train up and go and be placed in a job that's more sustaining. And that hopefully for PMEs, especially for PMEs, we do have displaced workers who are PMEs, and we want to ensure that their skills are relevant, right? They have to continue to keep up with the training. So we mentioned about lifelong learning. Lifelong learning is not only about, life skills, but it is also about looking at the financial aspects of how can I acquire a skill that can help my family to have 3 meals a day, and a good life, sustaining. So that is the part of it that the NTUC is also equally putting emphasis on. Better wages, but better work prospect, career transition, and also better welfare for everyone.
Okay.
And that's how we work together in Singapore. It's very unique that we have a tripartite system, government working very closely with employers and unions, and continually making the system work better for all workers.
Right. NTUC has, however, you've recommended financial assistance for retrenched workers. Okay, what is the benefit of this, apart from, of course, providing a social safety net? And would it create disincentives in terms of, creating disincentives to work, for example? And can it be designed to sort of eliminate or at least reduce those disincentives? What do you think about that?
So Vikram, first and foremost, when we talk about unemployment support, right? It is really not to demotivate or disincentivize workers from looking for a job. What it means is to have a short period of support for them, to turn them around. And in a recent, I think, Parliament debate, ASG, Assistant Secretary General Patrick Tay, also highlighted the part on NTUC's recommendation for insurance support, for unemployed workers. Yep. But the caveat is this, they must be showing activeness in applying for job. So that they must do. It is not a qualifier that anyone who loses a job gets unemployment support. So the effort must be there. They apply for job, and better still with the job skills integrator, how can we ensure the training, leads to a job placement and that they can stand on their own feet. So I think it encompasses many other efforts. For instance, talking to them on the career part of things. That means there's a conversation, career advisor, having a conversation with them, or career mentoring that requires a certain help and holding. And then they go on a training and they get a job. But during this period, how are they to live, without a job? Do they have a financial means of support? So this is the part that the NTUC was concerned of and say that how can we integrate the whole of it? The financial aspect, the job security aspect, training aspect, all in one to allow for individual to stand on their feet.
DPM.
Just to add that, I think what Sister Tana said is very much, in fact, consistent with government's thinking on this matter. NTUC has made a recommendation for some support for retrenched workers, but NTUC has also been very clear that the benefits for these workers have to motivate them towards finding a job. And that's very much along the lines of what I said just now, that when someone is displaced, it may not be optimal for the person to get the first job available, because you need a conversation with the worker, you need to find out what his abilities and strengths are, and possibly enable that worker to get trained and to move to a better job not the first job available, but that takes time. And then how do you support that worker during that period of training and job search and job placement? Now that's what we are thinking about in terms of perhaps there is room for the government to step in to provide some support during that transition period. And that's why I said in the budget debate that the way we envisaged a support system like this is that it's more akin to a re-employment support rather than unemployment support, because that's really our intent.
So this is in the works then?
Yes, it is.
This is.
We've said that we are studying this.
Okay.
I definitely think this is a good approach, and I think as we move forward, when the economy, right now we are looking at a very tight labour market, but when things turn down, right, I would expect there will be more retrenchments coming back again, and some kind of transitions of some industries moving in and out, and this will happen structurally speaking, it will happen more and more often. And with this thing in place, right, it gives certain, I think it gives certain sense of peace of mind for some people. And yet when they are looking for the next job, not jumping into the next available thing that they can find, which like what DPM says is not going to be optimal.
Right. Okay, so let's shift our focus to business and productivity.
Okay.
Now, DPM has affirmed that we are still emphasizing economic growth, growing the economic pie. Now, economic growth is a function of, number one, growth in the workforce, and number two, productivity. It's this plus this. Now, with sizable immigration pretty much off the table, and with the fertility rate being what it is, although there's a lot of effort to improve the fertility rate, but we're still about half of replacement rate. We're not going to have very much workforce growth.
Organic workforce growth.
No, we're not, yeah. So then we have to depend almost entirely on productivity for growth. Wouldn't that be difficult to do? I mean, productivity has been, in some years, quite low. From 2015 to 2019, it was pretty low. I believe growth has picked up since then, but in terms of the level, we're still well behind other advanced economies, right? So some people might say that it's a bit of a gamble to depend entirely on productivity for growth. What do you think, Alvin?
First off, I think that immigration is not, or the foreign workforce is not entirely off the table, but it's done at a more, if I still see it done at more modest and necessary level itself. So that was still...
No, I said sizable immigration is off the table. I mean, you will have selected immigration in high-end workers where we don't have skills, those workers, and right at the bottom. But sizable immigration of the sort that we used to have.
Okay.
And that is I mean, it seems to me to be off the table. But no, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so I think when you talk about the productivity side, I think for manufacturing, it's fairly easy to do the improvements itself in terms of making it more capital intensive, and that can improve the productivity a lot. But the question is, of course, the larger part of the economy, which is the services side. Yeah, and it is not so easy to, in that sense, I would think that if I look at services, some parts of the processes you can make it more productive, definitely, with using technology, but not the entire process. It's not so straightforward. But I think there are efforts on that. But I think in that sense, some areas, right, where in the budget itself, where there's upscaling and rescaling itself, that will help on the productivity part. As what DPM said, some of the sectors are being selected for the integrators program, including retail. That would actually also hopefully play a part. And I think at the end of the day, but I will not try to escape the point that we will still need foreign talent to come in to help augment the domestic labor market. That is, to me, without question, that can't be done away. Yeah.
Right. So, DPM, what is your view? Can we depend so extensively on productivity to power our growth?
To begin with, I think we need to recognize where Singapore's economy is today. Our per capita income is very high compared to, say, decades past, and relative to many other advanced economies. We have reached a very high level of per capita income, which means that, as with all other advanced economies, the growth rates will slow down.
Yeah.
Economy is now more mature. You're at a high base. The next incremental step gets harder and harder. So that's a natural evolution of our economy. We shouldn't get too despondent.
Okay.
Just because the growth rate is now 2% compared to 7% in the past. All economies evolve in this manner. So it's to be expected. But of course, neither should we allow our economy to stagnate and lose ground. So that's something we must never do, because if we lose ground, then the pie becomes smaller, and then we will be in face bigger challenges. So how do we keep on growing given how the high level that we are? It is true that our labor force growth will have to slow down, because we just have natural limits. We will continue to stay open. We will top up with foreign workers, particularly at the top end as far as possible, but there are also limits to that. And so labor force growth will eventually slow down, bound to happen. But that means that we have to focus on productivity and innovation to ensure that Singapore continues to move forward. It's not a gamble. This is an imperative. This is an economic imperative. All advanced economies at this level have to push on innovation and productivity to move forward. And we are in this stage of development as well now, where we really have to work harder on productivity and innovation. How do we achieve it? There are perhaps broadly three strategies. One, industry by industry. Looking at industry transformation, the government provides support, like what we have done in this budget through the Enterprise Innovation Scheme. And this is delivering results. I mean, you can see industry by industry transforming, restructuring. As Alvin says, the exportable industries, the manufacturing, exportable services industries, easier to do. Domestic services, harder, but still some promising outcomes are being seen, even in construction, F&B, and retail. And so we will continue to push this first strategy. But the second strategy is something that we also work on, which is to continue to attract high-quality investments, new projects that are at the frontier of technology, right? So it's not just organic productivity improvement, it's bringing in new activities from MNCs, cutting-edge stuff that will help push our technology frontier. And that's something we should recognize really can give us an extra boost to our economy in terms of innovation and productivity. And that's why we have topped up the National Productivity Fund by $4 billion in this budget, precisely to be able to promote and bring in and attract more high-quality investments that will really significantly boost our capabilities. And the third aspect of it is really our workers. Because you have firms, you have investments, but we also need our workers to continually reskill and upskill themselves. And that's the whole Skills Future ecosystem that we are working on.
Right.
And I think with all these three strategies, we can continue to make progress as a more innovative and more productive economy.
Right. Okay, let's talk about cost and the cost of doing business, which we've alluded to a little earlier. I mean, Alvin, you mentioned the rental costs going up. This budget has also enhanced the retirement adequacy for seniors, as well as helping middle-income Singaporeans save more for retirement. But these measures involve additional contributions from employers as well, which is going to add to costs. So looking at the entire picture, I mean, and this is a time of inflation. So looking at the whole picture with inflation, is Singapore still a good place to do business from the cost point of view?
Yeah, I think, when you look at doing business here, right, it's not just cost is definitely an important factor, but Singapore also offers many other factors for industries to relocate here or to invest here. I think the pharmaceutical industries, for example, are here for, I think, the business environment, the IP and protection and the legal structure that we have here, among other things, and the availability of the skill force that they need for the industries. So it is like there is beyond that the cost item itself. But coming back to the cost, yes, this has been would be an increasing concern, especially in the inflation environment, and where some of the costs, if you look at it globally speaking, right, may not be coming down quickly. It may stay elevated for a while. So those are the things that we probably have to deal with.
Right. DPM, how do you see Singapore as a place to do business from the cost point of view?
We will never be the cheapest place to do business in the region, that's for sure. Yeah. We can't compete on cost anymore. Right? So we have to ensure, obviously, that we don't price ourselves out of the competition, keep an eye on cost competitiveness, which we do all the time, but at the same time redouble our efforts on differentiating ourselves in terms of quality and value, which goes back to our earlier conversation about innovation, productivity, making sure that we can offer the world and investors a value proposition that's different from our competitors.
Right. What is our competition?
What is our competition? Well, attracting investments is a very competitive business. We can't just assume that just because EDB has been doing well all these decades that investments will just automatically come to Singapore. Particularly in a new environment now where more and more countries are talking about reshoring and onshoring, or nearshoring for that matter. They want, many of the advanced economies have also seen their manufacturing sectors being hollowed out in these years, and they want to rebuild their activities. So you see, America has its CHIPS Act, it has its other measures where they are rolling out vast subsidies to re-anchor activities back into the US. The EU has a similar program now to talk about attracting more activities and anchoring them back in Europe. So competition for quality investments, what we need precisely to advance our economy, will only get tougher.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay, DPM, can we turn to taxes, spending, and the fiscal position?
My favorite topic.
Your favorite topic. Okay. Now, you mentioned in your budget statement that our tax to GDP ratio is just 14%, compared to about 20 to 30% in other advanced economies. So far, we've managed to deliver pretty high-quality public services with low taxes. Now, is this sustainable in an aging society and slowing growth? I mean, can we really continue to have it both ways? Low taxes and good quality public service?
Well, we must try. It's not impossible. It's not impossible. I think it goes back to being very careful in how we spend money, being very judicious in putting in place any new programs, making sure that we get best value from money, from that additional spending that we put in place. And that's what we have been doing all this time, which is why, whether in healthcare, education, many areas of spending, if you look at the value for money that we achieve, we spend a lot less than many other advanced economies, but we get comparable or if not better outcomes than many of them. So that discipline must remain in how we spend in government, in terms of how we look at new public expenditures. I'm always reminded of this quip from the former US President Ronald Reagan, that the closest thing to eternal life on earth is a government bureaucracy. Okay. Once you put something in place, it's very hard to close it down. So be very careful before you introduce any new program. We typically start by looking at pilots. We consider what works, we look at the results, and then if the results are positive, then we start putting in place systematically nationwide. And I think that discipline is very critical.
Okay. Okay, on the medium term, Alvin, DPM mentioned in his roundup speech, I quote, that the tight fiscal position is very much a reality over the medium term, right? And there's an occasional paper by the Ministry of Finance which makes this very clear. Spending is around 18% of GDP and is going to rise to about 20% by 2030 and maybe even more because of spending on healthcare, on infrastructure, on social support. So I think, will we not face this issue of the government having to bridge the gap between spending needs and revenue? And how do we bridge this gap over the medium term? I mean, what options are there to raise revenue and or to cut spending? What do you think, Alvin?
Okay. I think first off, it's not just my opinion. I think it's broad market opinion that the government has always been very fiscally prudent. And as long as the political structure does not change much, this fiscal prudence position won't change. So that part, I think we are quite assured of. And the spending part, when it is on the trend increase, right, is inevitable in the aging society, whereby it's the social cost that is going up. And I think the other part of the cost that would also be, I would believe that has a meaningful impact that on trend increase would be on defense, because of the geopolitical environment that we see. So those two components would be increasing as long as we have this environment. But then your revenue streams that where you are referring to, for one, we have already seen the increase in GST this year and expected another 1 more percentage point next year. That will add to the revenue stream. Beyond that, I think, of course, when we look at the biggest components, then the next biggest component before GST, I think, is personal income tax revenue. We have already seen the top end being adjusted higher in the previous budget. And that is more on it will help in increasing the revenue, but also more importantly, that's the reason for it to make it a more fairer system. And there are also tweaks in terms of very targeted, I would say targeted wealth tax, whereby the more higher end property and the luxury or supercars are being taxed more on that front. Is there more that you can do?
Yeah, that's the question.
I think beyond a certain point, I do think that just on GST alone, right, there would be a case that there might be further increases in GST. I think we look at by 2030, there might be by then, at least another 1 percentage point increase. Beyond that, there may be room for personal income tax. I think relatively speaking, our personal income tax is still low compared to many of the advanced countries. But I do see also on the flip side, there might be limited room to tweak it close to their levels. You may have a few percentage points to add on that, but I think there's limited room. Then that probably leaves us with one particular elephant in the room, which is the corporate tax revenue, which is the biggest component right now. But of course, the challenges on that is, we talked about that earlier before this, on the BEP, base erosion and profit sharing, how that might impact that segment itself. That would be a concern, at least for me, when I look at the fiscal picture.
By base erosion and profit sharing, you're referring to the taxes on MNC, on
Correct.
Multinationals.
Yes.
Which
and how would that impact that? That's
a global minimum tax.
Correct.
Of 15% has been more or less agreed,
Yeah.
and that's what.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the concern in area. Of course, in other areas where there's more revenue, we have already start taxing the digital economy. Perhaps that may be an area that can be looked at.
Okay.
Again. Yeah.
Okay. DPM. So, what do you feel about the medium term? What are the options to raise revenue and or cut spending?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that Alvin talked about how the market recognizes the fiscal prudence and discipline approach that the government adopts for our fiscal strategies. I think that's very important. We don't take that for granted. The market may assume that, but it can easily change very quickly, as we have seen from the experience not so long, quite recently in other countries too. So we really ought to maintain that disciplined approach in thinking about public finances, which is why I mentioned earlier, discipline starts with spending. We do expect government expenditures to go up, but we have to be disciplined about the increase and make sure that we don't end up just with a very bloated public service or public expenditure. But whatever we do, make sure that there is good value for money. But if indeed public expenditure rises for good reasons, additional spending that we need to take care of the seniors, to support the vulnerable segments of society, then obviously we will have to look at additional revenues to make sure that we maintain a sustainable, fiscally sustainable system. And that's what we will continue to do in MOF, looking at different sources, different options in order to keep the budget in balance. But in all of these options, we will always make sure that the fiscal system remains one that is fair and progressive. Some people say it is like Robin Hood. We are taking from the rich to help the poor. But it's really not quite the right description of our philosophy. This Robin Hood idea is not quite an accurate description of our philosophy, because our philosophy is that we want everyone to do their part in nation building. Rich or poor, everyone contributes. That's why, for example, there is GST, there are broad-based taxes. Everyone contributes something to nation building. But those who are more well-off will contribute more. Those who are greater means will contribute more in taxes. At the same time, everyone benefits from government spending. Even the rich will benefit from some government spending. You send your kids to school, they will benefit from government spending. CPF, everyone gets a CPF account, healthcare, everyone benefits. But again, the ones who are more vulnerable, the ones who are in greater need, will benefit more from government spending. So that's, I think, a more accurate description of our philosophy, one that we believe is fair, progressive, and inclusive, and that's the direction that we will continue to move forward in this new era.
Right. So since you mentioned progressivity, we have that. We have the rich pay more taxes, they get less benefits. The lower income groups pay fewer taxes, they get more benefits. But what about the middle tier? Because the middle tier in Singapore, at least the numbers indicate that they also get more benefits than they pay in taxes. And there's a big difference between the middle tier in Singapore and the middle tier in some advanced economies. You mentioned, I think, it wasn't in your budget speech, in your roundup speech, that the middle tier in countries like the UK and Finland, they get $1 to 25 benefits for every $1 in taxes. But in Singapore, the middle tier gets $2 in benefits for every $1 in taxes. So, can we continue to rely so heavily on taxing the top 20% to make up our fiscal needs and under-tax the middle tier compared to other advanced economies? Can we continue to be so exceptional?
We have to.
Even with slowing growth and a tight fiscal position.
Well, we have been, and we will continue to do our best to remain exceptional. And doing so means we have to look out for the broad middle. It's a key to the well-being of the broad middle. I think is very vital in holding our social compact together. And over the decades, we have seen, look at real income growth in the middle, in the broad middle, in our median workers, median households. Real income growth has been higher than what it has been in many other advanced economies. The income levels is also higher, in fact, than many other comparable advanced economies. And that's how we've been able to progress as a society where broad middle sees continued improvements in their life, but at the same time, we pay attention to uplifting the lower income groups and creating a more equal society. That has been our journey so far, and we will do everything we can to continue delivering on this in the coming years.
Right. Finally, just to round off, Ms. Thanalakshmi, DPM indicated that we are not done yet in accelerating social mobility. What do you think is the unfinished business here? What more needs to be done, not only by the government, but also by your organization, the NTUC, and institutions like yours, and by the people? What do you think?
Yeah. So, as DPM, I think during his conversation, he did emphasize on the word tripartism. Tripartism is the ownership of not only businesses, workers, as well as government coming together to ensure, that our people have got better wages, work prospect, and welfare. If you look at NTUC itself, we have this NTUC training and placement ecosystem that has got the entire slew of support for the workers. For instance, you have E2I that helps you with the placement, and you have Learning Hub that emphasize on the industry-specific training, at the same time also continuous training for workers. And we also have unions supporting this particular essence of company training committee to ensure there's training roadmap for our workers, workers of today, workers of tomorrow, and special emphasis on PMEs because that's a growing segment of workforce.
Right.
Having said that, NTUC is very resolved to ensure that our workers, due to structural unemployment, lose jobs, but they are able to quickly turn around to get a job. And that's the reason that we got to work very closely with the businesses as well as government. As for individual Singaporeans, workers themselves, there's no end to learning. There's no end to training. So it is important that they embrace change is the only constant, and that we need to be adaptive and ensure that we also keep up with the lifelong learning. Okay, whether it's industry specific or your life skills, continue with the learning, as a habitual character in every Singaporean. The government actually, in a recent budget, DPM did announce quite a number of supportive measures for workers. For instance, older workers, the special credit, employment credit that he announced, it really supports employment of the older workers. At the same time, lifting up the ceiling, the CPF contribution from 6,000 to 8,000 actually benefits lots of middle income workers. I think the government's continuous support for workers, especially in the investment of training, is very crucial and is imperative. If we have a society that embraces training as part of our lifestyle, I think that will be a greater bonus, not only for NTUC, for businesses as well as the government, to ensure that the welfare part of things are really taken up by people by ensuring that they can live on their own feet. That's one part of it. The other aspect I would like to talk about is the aging society. I think the healthcare costs. The healthcare cost is something that workers are very concerned of because people are living longer. And if you look at if the cost is not moderated, especially for those aging Singaporeans that live in nursing homes and many other long-term facilities, I think we need to give them greater support. The dignity of the dignity of living a respectable life and ensuring that their needs are taken care of. So healthcare costs is something that is very, very important that we should address. And I'm glad that there are some things going on like Healthier SG and many other initiatives. So on the whole, I think everyone has to play a part for Singapore to sustain its growth, at the same time for workers to continue to be employed, full employment, and to have better wages, better welfare, and better work prospect, and ensuring that every worker is respected and no job is of a lesser dignity, but every worker must be respected and have a dignified job.
Okay, DPM, you have the last word. What is from the government point of view, what is the unfinished business on social mobility?
As Sister Tana said just now, a key aspect of this is really how we can make Singapore a truly uplifting society. Opportunities for everyone throughout their life to upgrade, do better, and be the best version of themselves. So investing in Skills Future, in worker training, in our human capital, and investing in a better system that will enable every worker to bounce back quickly from setbacks in life is something that we are thinking about. It's something that I think we can do more of. A second aspect of this on social mobility is that we must pay greater attention to lower income families, and especially to their children, because we must avoid families being trapped in a permanent underclass. And that requires us to think holistically how we can really help these families get uplifted, particularly intervening by closing the gaps in the children's early years. And that's why we're talking about Kids Start. We're talking about getting more of their children enrolled even at age 3 in preschool, and not just enrolled but attending regularly, and really taking a very family-centric approach, recognizing that the challenges that these families face are multifaceted. So how can we really take a family-centric approach and handhold them, have volunteers befriend them, have social workers come alongside, help them stabilize their lives and improve their life circumstances for themselves and for the next generation. And that's a big aspect of the work that we will continue to focus on. And then thirdly, as mentioned just now, on seniors, because we have a rapidly aging population, we have to take better care of our seniors. It's not just in the area of healthcare, but it's also about the whole space of long-term care. How do our seniors age in place with ease and peace of mind? Who will take care of them? How do we ensure their retirement security as they get older? And how do we provide for them a good living environment where they can continue to stay where they are, have peace of mind for their care needs, for their retirement needs? So that's another major piece of work that we are thinking about. And we are thinking about all of these different issues as part of our Forward Singapore exercise. We are deliberating very carefully about what policy changes might be needed, at the same time getting very useful inputs and feedback from Singaporeans from diverse walks of life, and also from the NTUC as part of its Every Worker Matters conversations. So we hope we can conclude this exercise by the second half of this year and put out a roadmap that will enable us to create a more inclusive and a more equal society.
Very good, sir. On that hopeful and positive note, I have to bring this roundtable to an end, but not before we thank DPM for making the time to come here and do this, and our fellow panelists, Alvin and Ms. Tana Lakshmi. Thank you very much. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in, and to UOB for sponsoring this event. Thank you.